Widow with nothing escapes with her daughters. The neighboring farmer changes her destiny the night she decided to leave did not arrive suddenly. It had been building for months, growing heavier with each passing day. Ever since her husband passed away, life had slowly closed in around her. At first, people offered sympathy. Neighbors came with quiet words and shared meals. Relatives spoke kindly, at least in the beginning, but sympathy does not last forever. Soon, kindness turned into distance, and distance turned into pressure. She was a widow now, and in that place, a widow without money had little value. The house she lived in did not belong to her. The land was not in her name. Even the smallest decisions were questioned. Some relatives reminded her again and again that she was living on borrowed mercy. Others hinted that her daughters were a burden she could not carry alone. Every word cut deep, but she stayed silent, because silence felt safer than resistance. Her daughters were still very young. One was old enough to understand that something was wrong, though she did not fully know what. The younger one only sensed fear in her mother's voice and clung to her clothes whenever strangers spoke too loudly. At night, when both girls were asleep, the widow lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how long she could protect them like this. Food became limited. Some days she gave her share to the children and told them she had already eaten. The clothes they wore grew thin. School became a distant thought. Each morning she woke up with the same question: how will I survive one more day? The final moment came quietly. There was no shouting, no dramatic scene, just a cold conversation in the evening. A relative spoke about plans for the house. Another suggested that the girls should be sent elsewhere for their own good. The widow listened, her hands shaking, her heart pounding. In that moment she realized something very clear. If she stayed, she would slowly lose her daughters, her voice, and herself. That night, after everyone went to sleep, she made her decision. She did not pack much, because there was not much to pack. A small bag held a few clothes, some worn sandals, and a small cloth with her husband's old photograph wrapped inside. That photograph was the only thing she truly owned. She tied her hair back, wiped her tears, and gently woke her daughters. "We are going somewhere safe," she whispered. The older girl asked questions, but the widow only smiled softly. She did not want fear to live in her children's hearts. She took each daughter's hand, stepped out of the house, and did not look back. Looking back would have broken her courage. The night air was cold. The road ahead was dark and unfamiliar. Every sound made her alert. She held her daughters close, walking carefully, step by step. She did not know exactly where she was going. She only knew she had to go forward. Staying was no longer an option. They walked for hours. Sometimes the children grew tired, and she carried one while holding the other's hand. Her arms ached, but she did not stop. She feared that if she stopped, doubt would return. The stars above felt distant, but she used them to guide her, telling herself that dawn would come eventually. As the night slowly faded, the shape of open land appeared. Fields stretched wide, covered in morning mist. The quiet was different here. It did not feel threatening. It felt empty but peaceful. The widow stopped near the edge of a field, her legs trembling from exhaustion. The children sat beside her, hungry and sleepy. She searched her bag and found only a small piece of bread. She broke it into pieces, giving most of it to them. They ate silently, trusting her without question. That trust hurt her heart and strengthened it at the same time. She watched the sky turn light blue. Birds began to move. Somewhere in the distance, she heard the sound of work beginning. This was not a town. It was farmland. She realized she had reached a village she had never seen before. Fear returned. She did not know these people. She did not know if they would help or turn her away. She adjusted her scarf, straightened her posture, and reminded herself that she was not weak. She was a mother protecting her children. She decided to rest for a short while before moving again. The children leaned against her, falling asleep almost instantly. As she watched them, memories flooded her mind. Her husband's laughter, the simple dreams they once shared. A small home filled with hope. She wondered what he would think if he could see her now. Then she told herself that he would be proud because she had not given up. Time passed slowly. The sun rose higher. Her eyes felt heavy, but she stayed alert. That was when she noticed movement nearby. A man was working in the field not far from where she sat. He moved with calm focus, tending the land like someone who had done it all his life. She lowered her eyes, not wanting attention. Experience had taught her that attention often brought trouble, but the man had already noticed them. He paused, wiping his hands, and looked in their direction. There was no anger in his face, only curiosity. Her heart raced. She gathered her daughters closer. She prepared herself for questions, for judgment, for being asked to leave. When he approached, she stood up slowly, holding her children behind her. He greeted her politely. His voice was calm, not demanding. He asked if they were all right. The widow hesitated. She had learned to be careful with her words. Finally, she nodded and said they were just resting. The man looked at the children's tired faces and the small bag at her feet. He did not ask many questions. Instead, he offered water. Something about that simple act made her eyes burn with tears. She accepted, thanking him quietly. As the children drank, the man asked gently where they were coming from. She did not tell him everything. She only said they had left a difficult situation and had nowhere to go. He listened without interrupting, without judgment. For the first time in many months, she felt like someone saw her as a human being, not a problem. He pointed to a small shaded area near the field and said they could rest there for a while. He told her there was no danger, that she was welcome to sit until the heat passed. There was no condition in his voice, no expectation. She nodded, unsure how to respond. Trust did not come easily anymore, but her body was too tired to refuse. She thanked him again and guided her daughters to the shade. As the man returned to his work, the widow sat quietly, watching him from a distance. She did not know that this moment, so simple and ordinary, was the first step toward a future she could not yet imagine. For now, all she knew was that she had survived the night. She had protected her daughters, and for the first time since her husband's death, the road ahead did not feel completely dark. The widow woke up slowly, unsure of how much time had passed. The shade of the trees kept the ground cool, and for a brief moment she forgot where she was. Then she felt her daughters pressed close to her, their small hands still holding onto her clothes, and memory returned all at once. They were in a new place. Far from the life she had escaped, far from everything familiar. She lifted her head and looked around carefully. The field stretched wide, golden under the growing sun. The man she had met earlier was still working, moving steadily as if the land itself knew him. She felt a mix of relief and worry. Relief that he had not disappeared. Worry because she did not know what would happen next. Her older daughter stirred and opened her eyes. "Mama," she whispered, her voice soft with sleep. The widow brushed her hair back gently and smiled. "It's okay," she said. "Rest a little more." The younger one slept deeply, her face calm for the first time in days. Hunger soon returned, sharp and demanding. The widow checked her bag again, though she already knew it was empty. She felt a familiar heaviness in her chest. She could handle hunger herself, but seeing it on her children's faces made it unbearable. She wondered how long kindness could last from a stranger. As if sensing her thoughts, the farmer returned, carrying a small container and a piece of cloth. He placed them on the ground at a respectful distance and stepped back. Inside was simple food and clean water, nothing fancy, nothing costly. Yet to her, it felt like a gift beyond value. She hesitated, pride and fear pulling her in different directions. Finally, she thanked him and accepted. The children ate slowly, carefully, as if afraid the food might disappear. The widow watched them, her eyes filling again. She promised herself she would never forget this moment. The farmer sat nearby, not too close, not too far. He did not stare, he did not question. After some time he spoke softly, asking if they had a place to go. She shook her head. Saying the truth out loud made it real. They had nothing. Nowhere. He nodded as if he had expected that answer. He explained that the land belonged to him and that he lived alone nearby. He said she could stay for a short time, rest, and decide what to do next. There was no pressure in his words, only honesty. The widow studied his face, looking for signs of hidden meaning. She found none. Just tired eyes and steady calm. Still, her heart remained cautious. Life had taught her that promises could change quickly. She asked what he would want in return. He seemed surprised by the question. He said nothing was required, only respect for the place. She nodded, feeling a small weight lift from her shoulders. They moved to a small shed near the field. It was simple but clean, offering protection from the sun. The widow arranged the space as best she could. She sat her daughters down and encouraged them to rest again. For the first time in a long while, she did not feel like she had to run immediately. As the day passed, she observed the farmer quietly. He worked from morning until late afternoon without complaint. His movements were careful and steady. She noticed the way he treated the land with patience and care. It reminded her of her husband, and the memory brought both comfort and pain. She wanted to help, but she was unsure if it would be welcome. Finally, she gathered her courage and offered. The farmer looked at her for a moment, then nodded. He gave her simple tasks, nothing too heavy. She worked carefully, grateful for the chance to be useful. Her daughters stayed nearby, playing softly with small stones and leaves. The widow kept glancing at them, making sure they were safe. Each small laugh felt like proof that leaving had been the right choice. As evening approached, a soft breeze moved through the field. The farmer brought more water and shared a quiet meal. They did not talk much. Words were not needed. Silence felt safe here. Later, as the sky darkened, fear returned to the widow's heart. Night always brought memories of what she had escaped. She worried that kindness might fade with darkness. But the farmer showed her where she could sleep and assured her that no one would disturb them. That night, she lay awake for a long time, listening to the sounds of the land. Insects, distant animals, the wind through the trees. It was different from the noise of the village, but it felt honest. She held her daughters close and allowed herself, just for a moment, to rest her mind. In the following days, a pattern slowly formed. The widow helped where she could. She cleaned, organized, and learned the rhythm of the farm. The farmer treated her with respect, never raising his voice, never making her feel small. Still, the villagers noticed her presence. Whispers began. People passing by looked twice. Some faces showed curiosity, others suspicion. The widow felt the old fear return. She lowered her eyes when strangers passed and kept her daughters close. One afternoon, she overheard voices near the field. People were talking about her. Questions about who she was, where she came from, why she was staying there. Her hands shook, and for a moment she considered leaving again before trouble could find her. The farmer noticed her unease. He did not ask many questions. He only told her that she had done nothing wrong and that she was welcome for as long as she needed. His calm confidence steadied her. Still, the widow knew that trust takes time. She worked harder, determined to prove she was not a burden. She woke early, slept late, and never complained. Her body grew tired, but her spirit slowly grew stronger. Her daughters changed too. They laughed more. They slept peacefully. They followed the farmer around with quiet curiosity, and he treated them kindly, showing them small things about the land. One evening, as the sun dipped low, the widow stood at the edge of the field, watching her daughters chase each other. She realized something important. For the first time since her husband's death, she was not just surviving. She was beginning to live again. She did not know what the future held. She knew challenges would come. People would talk. Life would test her again. But she also knew this. One simple act of kindness had opened a door she thought was closed forever. And as she watched the sky turn gold, she felt a quiet determination rise inside her. Whatever happened next, she would face it with the strength she had rediscovered. Life on the farm slowly settled into a steady rhythm, but peace did not come without effort. Each morning before sunrise, the widow woke quietly so she would not disturb her daughters. She washed her face with cool water, tied her scarf firmly, and stepped outside to greet the day. The land looked different at that hour, calm, open, and full of quiet promise. It reminded her that each new day was another chance to move forward. She began taking on more responsibility without being asked. She swept the shed, organized tools, and learned how to feed the animals properly. At first, her hands were clumsy. She made small mistakes and apologized often. The farmer never scolded her. He simply showed her how to do things better, then let her try again. His patience gave her confidence. Her daughters adjusted quickly to farm life. They learned which areas were safe and which were not. They watched insects with curiosity and followed the farmer at a distance, listening carefully when he explained simple things about plants and seasons. The older child began asking questions about how crops grew. The younger one laughed freely, her fear fading day by day. But outside the farm, eyes were watching. People passing along the road slowed down when they noticed the widow working beside the farmer. Some whispered to each other. Some shook their heads. A few stared openly, as if judging every movement she made. The widow felt their looks like stones on her back. Old fears crept in, telling her she did not belong, that she would soon be pushed away again. One afternoon, while she was carrying water, she overheard voices near the edge of the field. Two villagers stood talking in low tones. They spoke about her presence, questioning her past and wondering why the farmer allowed her to stay. They did not know she could hear them, but every word reached her clearly. Her hands trembled so badly that she nearly dropped the container. Shame burned inside her chest. She wanted to disappear. For a brief moment, the thought of leaving crossed her mind again. She imagined walking away before things became worse. That evening she worked in silence, her heart heavy. The farmer noticed the change in her behavior. He waited until her daughters were asleep before asking if something was wrong. She hesitated, then told him what she had heard. She did not accuse. She simply spoke the truth, her voice calm but tired. The farmer listened carefully. His expression did not change, but his voice was firm when he responded. He said people would always talk, especially when they did not understand something. He told her she had done nothing wrong and that her efforts spoke louder than words. He made it clear that no one had the right to force her away. Those words mattered more than she expected. They were not dramatic, but they were steady and sincere. They gave her the strength to stay. The days that followed tested her resolve. Some villagers avoided the farm entirely. Others became colder in their greetings. A few children pointed and whispered when they saw her daughters. The widow felt anger rise inside her, but she swallowed it. She reminded herself why she was there. She was not seeking approval. She was building a future. She worked harder than before. She learned how to plant, water, and harvest. She listened carefully to instructions and remembered every detail. Slowly, her hands became skilled. Her movements grew confident. The farmer began trusting her with more important tasks, and she took pride in doing them well. One afternoon, the farmer did not return from the field at his usual time. The sun moved lower, and concern filled her chest. When he finally appeared, she noticed he was limping slightly. He brushed off her worry, saying it was nothing serious. But she watched him closely from that day on. As time passed, she realized how much he carried on his own. The farm required constant attention. There were repairs, planning, and physical labor. She began helping without being asked, noticing small things that needed care. She fixed what she could and asked questions when she did not know. Trust between them grew quietly. They did not speak about it, but it was present in every shared task. There was respect, understanding, and a shared sense of responsibility. She no longer felt like a guest. She felt like part of the place. Her daughters noticed the change too. They began calling the farm home without thinking. At night they slept peacefully, their faces relaxed. The widow watched them and felt both joy and fear. Joy that they were safe. Fear that it could all disappear again. One morning, a small incident changed how the villagers saw her. A sudden problem arose near the road and people gathered, unsure what to do. The widow noticed the issue and stepped forward without hesitation. Using knowledge she had learned on the farm, she helped solve it calmly and efficiently. The farmer stood beside her, supporting her actions. The villagers watched in silence. Some were surprised, others looked thoughtful. No one spoke badly that day. After that, small changes followed. A neighbor greeted her politely. Another asked her a simple question about farm work. These moments were brief, but they mattered. The widow did not smile too much or push for acceptance. She let her actions speak. Despite progress, doubts still visited her at night. She wondered if she truly deserved this new life. She worried about the future, about what would happen if circumstances changed. But each morning, she chose to stand up and continue. One evening, as they shared a quiet meal, the farmer spoke about the land. He explained how difficult it had been to manage everything alone. His words were not a complaint, just a statement of truth. The widow listened, understanding more than he realized. She realized then that her presence was not only saving her own family, it was helping him too. As the stars appeared in the sky, she felt a calm strength inside her. She had survived loss, fear, and judgment. She was still standing, still working, still protecting her children. The road ahead was uncertain, but she no longer felt alone on it, and that made all the difference. The season began to change, and with it came new challenges that no one expected. The air grew heavier, and the sky often stayed covered with thick clouds. The land that once felt calm now demanded more effort. Crops needed careful attention, and every day mattered. The widow sensed that something difficult was approaching, though she could not explain why. One morning, the farmer did not wake up early as usual. She noticed the silence and felt uneasy. When she went to check on him, she found him sitting down, holding his side, his face pale. He tried to stand but failed. Pain showed clearly in his eyes, even though he tried to hide it. She rushed to his side, fear tightening her chest. He told her it was nothing serious, just a strain from working too hard. But she could see he was not well. For the first time since she arrived, she realized how fragile everything truly was. If he could not work, the farm would suffer. And if the farm failed, so would their safety. Without wasting time, she helped him inside and made sure he rested. She brought water, prepared simple food, and kept her daughters quiet so he could sleep. That day, she did not step into the fields. Instead, she sat nearby, listening to his breathing, hoping it would become steady again. By the next day, it was clear he could not return to work yet. The widow stood outside, looking at the land that now depended on her. Fear rose in her heart, but she pushed it down. She had faced worse before. She reminded herself that waiting would only make things worse. She decided to take responsibility. She began the day early, just as she always had, but now with a heavier weight on her shoulders. She planned each task carefully, remembering everything the farmer had taught her. She worked slowly but steadily, not rushing, not panicking. Every step felt important. Her body ached and her hands grew sore, but she did not stop. She thought of her daughters watching from a distance, their small faces filled with trust. That trust gave her strength. She knew she could not fail. The villagers noticed the change almost immediately. They saw her working alone in the fields, managing tasks usually done by the farmer. Some looked surprised, others looked doubtful. A few whispered again, questioning whether she could handle such responsibility. This time, their words did not shake her as deeply. She was too focused on what needed to be done. Each day tested her limits. There were moments when she felt overwhelmed, moments when she stood still, unsure of the next step. During those times, she closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and reminded herself that fear would not feed her children. Action would. The farmer slowly began to recover, but he remained weak. He watched her from a distance, seeing how she managed the land with care and determination. He did not interfere unless necessary. Instead, he offered quiet advice and encouragement when she asked. At night, exhaustion pulled her into deep sleep, but worry often followed her into dreams. She feared making mistakes that could not be fixed. She feared judgment if things went wrong. Yet every morning she woke up and continued. One afternoon, a sudden problem struck. Heavy weather damaged part of the field, threatening the crops they had worked so hard to protect. The widow stood in the rain, staring at the land, her heart pounding. She knew waiting for help would cost them everything. She acted quickly. She gathered tools, made quick decisions, and worked until her arms felt like they would give out. Her clothes were soaked, her hair clung to her face, but she did not care. All that mattered was saving what they could. The farmer watched from the shelter, concern mixed with admiration. He wanted to stop her, afraid she would hurt herself, but he also knew she was doing what needed to be done. When the rain finally stopped, the widow collapsed onto the ground, breathing hard. The land was damaged but not destroyed. Enough had been saved to continue. Tears ran down her face, not from pain but from relief. The villagers saw everything. Word spread quickly about what she had done. Some people who once doubted her now spoke differently. They talked about her strength, her courage, and her determination. Not everyone changed their mind, but enough did to make a difference. A few days later, someone brought help without being asked. Another offered supplies. These were small gestures, but they carried meaning. The widow accepted them with gratitude, not pride. She knew better than anyone how fragile support could be. Her daughters stayed close to her during this time. They watched their mother work with focus and calm, even when tired. The older one began helping with small tasks, proud to be useful. The younger one followed closely, copying every move. One evening, after a long day, the widow sat beside the farmer as the sun set. The land looked tired but alive. He thanked her quietly for everything she had done. His voice carried respect she had never heard directed at her before. She shook her head gently and said she did what anyone would do. But deep inside, she knew it was more than that. She had chosen courage over fear. She had chosen responsibility over escape. That night she thought about her past life, about the woman she used to be. She remembered how small she had felt, how powerless. Now, despite the hardship, she felt something new, confidence. Not loud or proud, but steady and real. The crisis did not end immediately. Recovery took time. There were setbacks, days when progress felt slow, but the hardest part had passed. The widow had proven something important, not only to others but to herself. She was no longer just surviving under someone else's kindness. She was standing on her own strength. As the farmer slowly returned to his work, he did so differently. He trusted her judgment. He consulted her decisions. Their partnership became clear to everyone who watched. The widow understood then that destiny does not change in dramatic moments alone. Sometimes it changes quietly, through effort, through persistence, through refusing to give up when everything feels heavy. And as she watched her daughters sleep peacefully that night, she knew one thing for certain. No matter what the future held, she had already crossed the hardest part of the road. The days after the hard season slowly became calmer. The land began to heal, and so did the people who lived on it. The crops that survived started to grow stronger, their green color returning little by little. Each morning, the widow walked through the fields, checking the plants, touching the soil, and feeling a quiet sense of pride. What once felt like a place of fear now felt like a place she understood. The farmer fully returned to his work, but things were no longer the same as before. He no longer carried everything alone. He asked her opinion. He listened when she spoke. Decisions were shared, not given. This change was not announced to anyone, but it was seen by all who passed by. The villagers noticed too. They saw how the farm improved, how the work flowed smoothly, how the children looked healthy and calm. Slowly, the whispers faded. They were replaced by nods, polite greetings, and sometimes even smiles. The widow accepted these changes quietly. She did not seek approval. She simply continued being herself. Her daughters began to attend a small local school. On the first day, the widow felt nervous, standing at a distance as they walked inside. She feared old patterns would return, that her children would feel unwanted. But when they came home that afternoon, their faces were bright. They spoke about lessons, kind words, and new friends. The widow listened, her heart full. At home, life followed a gentle routine. Meals were simple but shared. Laughter returned to the evenings. The widow found herself smiling more often, sometimes without realizing it. She still missed her husband deeply, but the pain no longer controlled her. It lived quietly inside her, alongside gratitude for what remained. One evening, the farmer invited her to sit outside as the sun went down. They watched the sky change colors just as they had many times before. This time, there was something different in the air, a sense of reflection. He spoke about the past, about how lonely the farm had once felt. He admitted that he had almost given up more than once. The widow listened carefully, understanding more than he knew. She shared her own story too, not all at once, but piece by piece. She spoke of loss, fear, and the long nights when she felt invisible. There were no promises made, no big words spoken, just honesty, just respect. As time passed, the widow realized something important. The help she had received was never meant to make her dependent. It was meant to help her stand again. And now she was standing. She began to plan for the future, carefully and realistically. She saved what little she could. She learned more about managing resources. She wanted her daughters to grow up knowing stability, but also strength. She wanted them to see that hardship did not define a person. Choices did. The villagers began to involve her more. Someone asked her advice about crops. Another asked her help organizing a small task. These moments were small but meaningful. She was no longer seen as an outsider. She was part of the community. One day, a woman from the village approached her quietly. She spoke about her own struggles and thanked the widow for being an example of courage. The widow was surprised. She had never thought of herself that way, but she understood then that strength can inspire others without trying. The farmer offered her a formal place on the land, not as charity but as partnership. He explained it clearly, fairly, and respectfully. The widow took time to think. She did not rush. When she agreed, she did so with confidence, knowing she had earned it. Life continued, not without challenges but with balance. There were still difficult days, moments of worry, and times when the future felt uncertain. But the widow faced them differently now. She trusted herself. She trusted the work of her hands. Her daughters grew taller, stronger, and more curious about the world. They spoke of dreams, small and big. The widow listened, encouraging them, reminding them that effort matters more than fear. Sometimes at night, she would step outside and look at the stars. She would think of the nights she left everything behind, holding her daughter's hands, not knowing where the road would lead. She realized now that escaping had not been the end. It had been the beginning. The neighboring farmer had changed her destiny, not by saving her, but by giving her space to save herself. By choosing kindness when it was easier to turn away. By seeing her not as a burden, but as a person with strength waiting to rise. And the widow, once with nothing, now had something far greater than what she lost. She had dignity. She had purpose. She had a future built on effort, trust, and quiet courage. Her story did not end with riches or sudden success. It ended with stability, respect, and hope. And sometimes, that is the greatest destiny of all.